Hello and welcome to the Cineskinny, the podcast from the people behind the skinny. It's Jamie Dunn here again, and I'm still kicking around Glasgow Film Festival, which is nearing its end, and I thought it would be a good opportunity to catch up with a couple of fellow critics and friends of the pod to discuss what we've all been watching at the festival. So joining me today is Iana Murray. Iana.
Hi.
And Rory Doherty.
Hello.
Hi Rory. So, Iana, Rory, you're well known on the podcast. You've made little cameos.
Famous.
But maybe you could just start by giving us a little intro and telling us who you're writing for and how your festival's going so far.
Yeah, these days I'm writing for GQ mostly, but I popped up around in Little White Lies, The Skinny of course, W. And yeah, my festival's been good. It's been a bit weird just because I think in the past festivals I've just been like a uni student coming along, and I've had all the time in the world to watch anything and everything. So I've just been so exhausted by the end, but now I'm a proper adult, sadly, who has to have a job and doesn't have the time to see as many things. So it's been pretty relaxed for me. I've seen a couple of really great things, but I'm just sad. I wish I'd seen more, but it's been fun to catch up with people, definitely.
That's what the public don't know. As a critic, you can't just swan around watching films.
We have a really tough. That's what they don't know, is that we have maybe the most difficult job in the world.
It's the toughest. But generally, you're not just watching films. You're writing films. You're running around doing interviews. You're doing all sorts. So
yeah, I've about just thousands of words of transcription for interviews I've not done that I'm just delaying until they combust or something like that. I'm Rory. You can find me at Flicks UK, Paste Magazine, Why Now World, and The Skinny, amongst others. Yeah, it's been good. I'm based in Edinburgh, and I sort of decided to not stay in Glasgow for the whole festival and just come through when I needed to. So I've been watching a lot of stuff on the online platform for press and industry people. But it's nice. I mean, I love Glasgow. It's a great festival, so it's felt like it's got a really nice hub, and it's been a fun but very, very busy sort of festival. I'm now in the period of more time is dedicated to work than watching films. Yeah.
But last night we did see a film,
Yes.
and that was a surprise film, which I think is always one of the most anticipated traditions of GFF. It's a really kind of fun, buzzy screening, and as the name suggests, it's a screening where the audience don't know what they're going to see. They go in absolutely blind. It's always a tight secret. And some years you can actually guess what it is, because there's always a big film kind of missing from the programme. But I think last night everybody was a little bit blindsided by what it was. So the film was War Pony, the debut film from Gina Gammell and Riley Keough. Did you guys predict we were going to see that one?
No. We were all just talking about Tetris. We were talking about, but it was a proper surprise and a welcome one. I think that it starts and you're like, I'm going to work out what this movie is by the credits or the distributor or the names that come up, and then it was a good 3 or 4 minutes in, and everyone was still massive question marks over their head. But that meant and then it wasn't until I realised it was War Pony, which I think I'd heard about from Cannes or something like that, until the credits came up at the end and it said War Pony. But yeah, it was a welcome surprise.
Yeah, I should probably set it up. So War Pony is set in and around the Pine Ridge Native American Reservation in South Dakota, and it follows two parallel stories about two young guys from the Native American community. One is Matho, who's about 13, and the other is Bill, who's maybe 20. And the film is a very kind of loose narrative following them as they go about kind of various misadventures around town. Maybe start with Iana. What did you reckon to this one?
The thing is, I had no idea what the film was until the title card came up at the very end, and I was like, oh, this is War Pony. And I had heard about it at Cannes, but I chose not to see it because my friend Douglas had seen it and told me it was awful, so I just skipped it completely at Cannes. And so now War Pony's just been forced upon me, and I'm fine with that. I appreciated it for what it is, and I thought it to be, really immersive and empathetic to these people's struggles. And then realizing it was War Pony and it's directed by Riley Keough and Gina Gammell kind of left a kind of sour taste in my mouth, realizing who the people behind this film were. I think this kind of just brings up difficult conversations about who can tell other people's stories. And I know that they put so much time and effort into including Native American Indigenous voices into the film. From what I've read, Riley met the two writers, Franklin C.O. Bob and Bill Reddy, on American Honey, and they're both writers on War Pony. So she's obviously gone through these lengths to include Indigenous voices, but I think I'm just curious why they felt it was their place to make this film their directorial debut. I'm just a bit, I don't know.
Yeah.
It is really interesting how the end of the movie, which is the most basic information about the film, completely reframes what we've seen up until that point. Because it is about a lens to which you're watching this, and the way that this... I mean, if that was just regularly programmed, it would be a much more conventional way of engaging with this movie. But in a sense, and it's not just that we didn't know what the film going in was, the way that the film is structured, the titles and the director doesn't turn up until the end.
Yeah.
So we've got through the whole emotional experience before this sort of new lens, which is usually key information, sort of comes in.
Yeah, no, totally. Well, I guess like the thing about Keough is she is part Cherokee, is that right? Like
I think an
like,
eighth.
Is that an eighth? So it is like quite... I mean, I've no idea what her connection is to this community at all. So it was a surprise that this is her first feature, and I think you're totally right. It does ask a lot of questions about, slight colonialism, going into like telling other people's stories on their behalf,
Yeah.
And saying all that, I thought it was a kind of really immersive, interesting film, and it took me a little while to get into it. I don't know if you felt this, but I felt like the first 20 minutes, because it's so diffuse and the narrative is so loose, it took you a while to grapple onto who was actually the story was about, because initially it's a lot of kids kicking around, and it took me a second to work out, it's these two main characters we're going to follow. But I think once I got hold of them, I kind of really enjoyed the film. Like I felt like it was an interesting watch. Rory?
I think especially because the dialect used is I can imagine very authentic to these communities, and sounds, if you just go into it blind, sounds difficult to grasp onto, not just what people are saying, because it's not like it's hard to follow or understand what people are saying, but it is a very sort of rich dialect between characters, and it's very well lived in. And if you are just being put into this community, there is maybe a bit of whiplash if you know nothing going into it. But I agree. I mean, again, saying whether or not how authentic it feels is marred by the fact of how authentic the film actually is in terms of intention. But I was really engaged by the characters, by the two different stories, and I thought we see a lot now of movies getting unprofessional actors involved in films, and I don't know enough about the casting of this process, but I did think that both of the lead boys and their supporting sort of ensemble were really well performed, and there was genuine, incredibly detailed and layered emotional realities going on to these performances, and a lot of it can be communicated either silently, as is the case with Matho, but with Bill as well. It's not that he doesn't say what he's feeling, is that he says a lot but not exactly reflecting what he's feeling, and I thought that was sort of really well handled.
I think the nice thing about the film is, I think usually when you see these films that are looking at these communities who are struggling, economically, it can usually be very punishing. I remember Capernaum was a very difficult film to watch, but I didn't think this was the case here. I think there were a lot of moments of, I wouldn't say joy, but levity. There's a really great sequence towards the end set to Come and Get Your Love that just really elevated the film for me and really upped my enjoyment of it. But yeah, I think in that way they found a good balance of, kind of despair and levity in that sense. Just another interesting point I was thinking about was there's a plot point in the film where Bill is employed by this white rancher and his wife to kind of do odd jobs and then also work on their farm. And I think what they're trying to say is, the way that these white people exploit native labor. And then when the credits come up and it's like, it's directed by these two white women, very privileged white women, you know, this granddaughter of Elvis who's never experienced what this kind of reality is like, using, you know, native labor to kind of like bolster her directing career. It did just like reframe the entire thing for me. But I don't think that entirely negates the elements of it that I did appreciate.
It's so wild that it's literally Elvis's granddaughter in terms of Elvis's history with doing whitewashing a lot of diverse talent and labor and creativity is thorny at best.
Yeah, it's also interesting it's two women as well, and I felt another major flaw while I was watching the film is the women of this community are completely ignored. I couldn't name a single female character.
Yeah.
It's like it's very much set on these boys, but these boys are not, well, certainly Bill doesn't treat the women in his life particularly well, and there's a whole sort of subplot about he may be kind of trafficking young women for this white rancher. But again, the fact that none of these women have any agency, seem to have a name, was a weird choice, I thought.
There's a difference, I suppose, between replicating dynamics that you find in any space, in any community, and trying to comment on that. And you can do that while also featuring really rich characters who do, as you say, have agency. And it felt like that's when you feel like just the effects of a narrative sidelining characters. Like, it's not that this is a unbiased, no story is an unbiased sort of look. You are bringing into any storytelling the biases and the way you favor some characters and some stories over others. I'd be interested to know what happened in adaptation there, because as you say, it's like she has a working relationship, at least Riley does, with these screenwriters, and I wonder how the sort of four of them work together to get this onto the screen. Yeah,
so I think it's a film that left us all a bit uneasy, but it's not without its qualities, especially from those young performers. Like, you can't take away those young kids are great, I think.
That I just wanted to say, as well as winning the Camera d'Or, which is like the award for best first film at Cannes, it also won the Palme d'Or, which is awarded to the best dog in the whole festival, and I think the poodle in that really carries that film.
Yeah.
What we should say, there's a great subplot about Bill. Bill's like a little entrepreneur, isn't he? He's like a little scrapper who's always trying to get money. But part of his get rich quick scheme is to become like a dog breeder, and he gets like this beautiful poodle that he's going to sort of make.
And everyone says this is a terrible idea, and maybe I don't know enough about dog breeding on reservations, because I was like, what's the problem? What's the problem with this? Everyone will just have a bunch more poodles, but that's why I'm not an entrepreneur.
Yeah, so mixed feelings on this one, but I think as a prize film, it's actually quite a bold choice.
Yes.
I think that's a really inspired choice, because I think usually with these surprise films, you tend to go kind of the like crowd-pleasing genre route, and I was expecting Infinity Pool. I think that's what most people were expecting, so I was really pleasantly surprised just to not get Infinity Pool.
Yeah. I think we are at the end of the day talking about being critics with jobs at these festivals. We all are still children who like a shiny surprise and anticipation, like it's birthday presents. So it's always nice when we do actually get fully surprised.
So that was War Pony. It's out on the 9th of June from Picture House. So if you're interested, you like the sound of that, you can see it then. So another film we've all seen is Sanctuary, which is an interesting one. It's Christopher Abbott and Margaret Qualley star in this kind of kinky two-hander set entirely in a hotel. Abbott plays Hal, who's the heir to a hotel chain, who's become reliant on regular bouts of humiliation from this dominatrix called Rebecca, who's played by Qualley. And she clearly relishes making this tycoon feel like a worm. But because Hal is about to inherit his dad's company, he decides he can't be seen to be doing this anymore. And it turns out this is going to be the last night together, and he's trying to fob her off. But Rebecca has other ideas. Now, Rory, could start with you. What did you make of this one?
I thought it was pretty great. I feel like I started watching it and I was like, is this the dark universe version of Good Luck to You, Leo Grande? Where this is not like a sort of nice, educational, sort of cozy feeling about sex and sex workers in a hotel room. This is the sort of flip side of that, where everything's really twisty and in your face and at times unpleasant. But I felt like it was genuinely like very erotic. I thought the performances and the chemistry were really impressive. I thought that there was a little bit much sort of overcompensating for being in a hotel room. So multiple times the camera does like flips and like it's very showy, and the visual style can feel a bit jumpy. But I thought that genuinely the film had a really good grasp of an understanding of dramatic power balances and dynamics, and it played with those in a really fresh and engaging way, which made it just a really satisfying watch.
Yeah.
I just had such a blast watching it, and I feel like in my screening anyway, I think it was like the first GFF screening, people did not know what they were in for, so there were quite a few walkouts when I saw it, but I always revel when there's a walkout. It makes me feel like a proper like sicko who can put up with anything.
Yeah.
But I think the thing I really enjoyed about it is like actually there's like little to no sex at all in it, despite it being about a dominatrix. Like everything that is kind of sexual about it is off screen, which I thought was a really cool element to it. And I think it's funny because Christopher Abbott has this other film, Piercing, which has like slightly similar premise to it. So I wonder if like Christopher Abbott just has like a thing for like sexual torture or something. It's a really fun film. I had such a blast of it.
If he does, I'm all for it, because I thought, again, he was so good in this. And actually, the surprise for me was Qualley, because I've seen on other things, I've not sort of loved her, because I always think she's quite a gangly performance. I don't find her quite nervy. I don't know if you find that she's got a kind of Diane Keaton quality, you know, like there's something about her that's a bit kind of like gauche in a way, but she was so good at this character because she just flips from being she comes in as that kind of gauche. The setup is she's pretending to be the secretary and she's like a bit nervous, but actually she's in complete control. She's so cool, so calm. She's got some great lines. I thought she was a real kind of standout. If anything, I think maybe her and Abbott are a bit better in the script, because I feel it could have went a bit deeper into this relationship and why this relationship exists. You know, it's all kind of quite surface. It's a very flashy film, really fun to watch, but I don't think it goes super deep, which would be my own complaint. But I think it really comes alive actually in the last 10 minutes, because it kind of flips from being this kind of cat and mouse thriller to actually being almost a romantic comedy. It's so joyous at the end.
I was thinking that where the sort of twist in the end, it ends on this very ironic, like literally like a punchline, and I thought it's a great twist to just go very sincere, very earnest, because what that shows, it's like, well, have we, in being this twisty, undercutting sort of power play for the whole film, have we built enough of an actual core relationship or dynamic between these two people that we can support just going very sincere and romantic? And I think it pulls it off, even though it's not a very it's not expected or necessarily. I think a lot of people would like it just to go quite dark and end on the sort of twisty fuel that's been coursing through it. But I agree with in terms of Qualley. Like I kind of think I like other performances of her now more after seeing this. Like I remember seeing Stars at Noon, the Claire Denis film, which got praised by everyone who saw it after Cannes, and I really hated that film. And then after seeing this, I was like, I kind of see what she was doing. Like I understand what she's going for, how she's been directed, and I think it's actually bold. So, you know, I hope she gets famous for other reasons than her mum, basically, because she's a really, really good performer.
I love the earnestness of the ending, like you said, just because it kind of eschews expectations in that way of where this is going to go. There's kind of like this like simmering threat of violence in there as well that doesn't go there, and I really appreciated that element of the relationship as well. I think one of the criticisms that I read is that it feels like a one-act play in the sense that it all takes place in this hotel room. But what I actually really liked about that is just like the energy in there just feels really otherworldly, like in the sense that like a hotel, like in a hotel room there's kind of like no sense of time or place, and I thought that was a really interesting element to throw in the relationship where, like, you know, the balance of power is really shifted, and there's also just a sense that like every conversation they have, you don't know if they're being serious or not. is it part of the game, or are they actually talking earnestly about their dynamic? I think it's really interesting, like the curveball it throws at the beginning, where you think she's the secretary, and then you actually understand where this is going, and then it's like every conversation after that is like, oh, is this still part of the game that they're playing, or what's actually happening here? I think that was just a really fun, it was just a really fun element of the film, where you just really didn't know where it was going to go, and every direction it went, you couldn't predict it.
Yeah, when I say that the script isn't like that deep, it isn't deep, but it's super smart. Like it has those fake outs, and I love there's a kind of lovely moment where you assume that this has went all off script for like the last half hour, but then we get a little glimpse of the script, and you're seeing that everything is line by line. This is like all part of the game they're playing, which is really fun. To me, it reminded a little bit of Phantom Thread in a strange way. Like yes. I think what it's saying is basically, in this world, no matter what your little kink is or what your fetish is, there's probably someone out there for you. I think that's a nice message.
I did say that. I said, like, I'm happy for these sickos. Like, you know, it doesn't matter how they're meant for each other, and that is a particularly film language thing of getting you really into people you would not necessarily even not about their sort of sexual preferences. But I don't think I'd particularly think a multi-millionaire hotel heir son was a particularly nice person, especially as he treats people not in the sort of sex games of the film. But that's how it plumbs into empathy, and we do really understand through this dynamic what they care about and what kind of love they're capable of. And you're just like, you know, I wish you the best, you weirdos. And there's a lot of films about sex and sexual kink and fetishes or sex work have this framing of like no judgment, and this film kind of ends up there, but not by espousing that the whole movie. I feel like it is about judgment, and it is about fear of humiliation and the thrills of humiliation. And so by the end, it's not, we didn't get to this place of, I think, affection for these characters. We didn't get through it by a lack of judgment, but the sort of the multifaceted nature of judgment is sort of baked into the story.
I agree. So Sanctuary doesn't have a release date, but I would keep an eye out for it. It's a fun one, and if you like these two performers, I would say definitely go, because they are on top form. So the festival is nearing its end. We've got 3 more days to go, but we've all seen a big chunk of the festival by now, and I just wanted to maybe catch you two before you leave and see what has been your favourite so far. So Iana, you want to go first?
Yeah, I think, well, like I said earlier, I didn't get to see as much as I wanted to, but one that just became an instant like favourite of the year for me was How to Blow Up a Pipeline. And I know you guys talked about it on the pod before, so I'll just reiterate everything that you said, but I just love that there was such this propulsive energy to it, and you know, the way that it builds up tension and then like rips it apart from you with these cliffhangers. I thought that was just like, it had such an amazing rhythm to it. And I think something else I appreciated about it was just how strong in its convictions it was, in its politics. It didn't feel both sidesy in that way, in the sense that certain mainstream films could, you know, play to all 4 quadrants in that way. And I know that this was based on a manifesto book, as it was, and I think it's a really interesting, it's just a really interesting way to approach adaptation. I thought it was just so fresh, and it's weird because it's kind of like framed as a heist film, but it's also like, I've never seen a film like this before, ever. It just felt so unique and fresh to me. I really enjoyed it so much, and I know you did too.
I also loved it. Yeah. So, but yeah, I agree. It's a really unique way of making a political text in a way where it's not that it's sneaking in these ideas, it's wearing them so brazenly, and you just end up caring about these motives, not because they sit you down and tell you about why all of this is justified, but because you feel how compelling and necessary these ideas are through the tension and the empathy of the characters.
And Rory, what's been your pick so far?
I really love this Japanese film called A Man by Kei Ishikawa, which I just saw on a whim, and it's like this. it's part of that kind of genre of Japanese type chillers, which are kind of like based around a premise of a guy just shows up, like Kiyoshi Kurosawa's Cure, but also more recent ones like Rage and Harmonium. And in this one, it's like starts as a domestic drama for a divorcee and her son in rural Japan. This new kind of guy turns up, they start a family together, and then after his death, they find out that he was not who he was saying he was. And so a lawyer starts to investigate who the swap, kind of mishmashing of identities that have been swapped, and it dwells so much on what defines us, what makes us our identity, what we can change about ourselves, what we can't change about ourselves, the power of faces, and sort of what lives on in our expression. And it turns from this thriller in the middle part to something genuinely quite tragic by the end, as it sort of fades back to reality. It's incredibly well directed and performed. So yeah, that's one. It's being released by Match Factory's sort of collaboration with Mubi, so it will be out this year, hopefully. But it's a tremendous film, and yeah, definitely a must-watch for me.
I didn't see it. Iana, did you?
No, I didn't see it either.
I have heard people are raving about it, so
yeah,
you're not the only one.
I know, I'm not alone.
We have a review on the Skinny if you're interested as well. Any other picks to throw out there? Just quick fire things you've loved.
I wanted to shout out When the Waves Are Gone, the Lav Diaz. It's like a big point of shame for me that I'm a Filipina who had never seen a Lav Diaz film until now. And the way that GFF were framing this was like, this is the most accessible Lav Diaz film, clocking in at only 3 hours. And it was a pretty breezy 3 hours. And it did feel quite like surprisingly conventional. It's kind of a two-parter in that they're both about corrupt police officers who are like looking to take revenge on each other. It was like the kind of film that maybe like Martin Scorsese would make or something like that, but in this really proper slow cinema, abstract, lyrical kind of filmmaking. I mean, I'm not familiar with Lav Diaz's work, but I assume that's what his work is usually like. And I just thought it was really engaging. There's like a dozen dance sequences in that movie that are like really fun and really silly and kind of like test your patience. I know there were like people sitting around me like checking their watches like, when is this guy gonna stop dancing? But yeah, it was just a really like, I wouldn't say slick, but it's a really interesting, politically charged crime thriller, I'd say. Yeah,
I think we share this feeling at festivals, which is if you can sense the audience is openly hostile, it only fuels your enjoyment more if you like the film. I had that with Memoria and Ennie's Main, where it's like I can feel restlessness and like irritation around me. In terms of other films I saw, I think I was really big on like films where I had big time jumps in them, because between A Man, really love Blackberry, but also The Beasts, which has been featured on the Skinny at some point before, and Rice Boy Sleeps, which is about Korean immigrants to Canada in the 90s and sort of a single mother and her son growing up, which is an utterly beautiful, really, really well crafted and emotionally compelling film that I adored, that is up for the Audience Award, so hopefully it will be getting some love from here and beyond, really, but it's a really special work.
Those all sound good. One thing I was going to say about Lav Diaz, I noticed he was one of the guys who was brought up in that notorious Guardian article a few weeks ago about the length of movies.
Oh, yeah.
And how, you know, it's a real kind of bro-y, kind of macho thing to go and see a Lav Diaz film, which I think is really underserving his films, because I think you're right, they are funny, they are kind of like, usually they are surprising, they aren't just like this kind of slow cinema, they usually have like these kind of interesting elements. So yeah.
Was it a very bro-y crowd when you saw it at the Glasgow Film Festival?
The bro-iest I've ever been.
It was that and the screening of Sanctuary we both went to. That was a big machismo energy going on.
A funny thing that happened actually was someone's phone kept going off during the film. I mean, it's not funny, it's irritating. But there was a man sitting behind me, and about the sixth time the phone had pinged, this guy behind me leaned at me and was like, "Can you turn your phone off now, please?" And I was like, "It's not me." And the man was like, he was like the last person I'd expect to be in this kind of film, like Lego film, bro.
Well, they're everywhere.
Yeah.
And we need to keep our wits about us. Their tastes are very broad.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
That's one thing we say about film bros. They're broad church. And any other comments? Are we done? Is this us? Are we a podcast?
Someone was talking a lot through Chevalier, and then 10 minutes before it ended, said loudly, "Is this real? Is this based on a real person?
Is this real?
Is this real?" Well, I don't think they misunderstood what fiction was. I think they didn't understand if this was based on a true story or not. I'm going to guess they didn't get the most out of that film. But
perhaps
that's what I miss about in-person festivals, is just strange encounters like that in the cinemas. That's sort of why we come out.
Yeah. Another audience highlight for me was at the first Q&A for Blackberry. I wish I could remember the question that this person had now, but
I think I know what the question was.
They had the strongest Glaswegian accent, and I think the question was a plot question that had already been answered in the film. So everyone was answering it for Matt Johnson, and after this was all happening, Matt was like, "I'm sorry, I did not process a single word of what you said," and that's just Glasgow. That's just Glasgow.
And because of how small the festival really is, someone I crashed with last week was also at that screening, and she was able to decipher that the question was about what movie nights would you do, because it's about plot in the movie.
Yeah.
And she's like, what movie nights would you do? And they're like, well, they're in the movie. I made the movie, he made the movie, he put in the movie nights.
What movie nights did he do on Blackberry?
Well, that would have been a good question, but unfortunately no one could understand.
Well, that's the thing about Glasgow. I think Glasgow has actually crazy audiences, but really good audiences. All the screens I've been to have been really full. The audience seems to be really up for it. And a few nutters is fine. That's
they're necessary.
Yeah,
they're necessary.
Fun of it.
They're the lifeblood of film festivals.
We don't get so many Rajas over at the Edinburgh Film Festival. It's all a bit more posh and polished, but we love a Glasgow Raj.
Yeah, they do. Okay. No comment.
So that's us, Rory. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
You're welcome.
Thanks for having me.
And so for more information on Glasgow Film Festival, head to theskinny.co.uk/film for all our GFF coverage. That's been all from us. See you later. Bye.
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 Sterling work.
I never know how to end a podcast.
That's when the music comes in.
Yeah.